Hi, everybody. It's Ashley of Day to Day Social Work. I am a private online tutor and I specialize in assisting people to pass the license exam in social work on the master's and bachelor's level. You can find me online at daytodaysocialwork.wix.com/my site, and you can find me on YouTube and Facebook at Day to Day Social Work. So, I wanted to come and introduce a new service that I'll be offering in 2019, which will be personal coaching or personal consulting. I want to make it very, very clear up front that this is not a therapy service. Again, this is not therapy. I am licensed on the master's level in the state of South Carolina, and I'll put a link below where you can see the status of my license. It'll take you directly to the licensing and labor board or labor and licensing board for the state of South Carolina. And I'll also put my license number there so that you can see it. But I am not clinically licensed in the state of South Carolina. I am currently under supervision for my LISWCP, which in the state of South Carolina is your licensed independent social worker clinical practice. So, again, I am not offering therapy, but I'm offering personal consulting and personal coaching. So, what exactly is personal coaching and personal consulting? So, it's basically when you have a need or you have a problem or a challenge and you need someone to help you through that time. So, even though it sounds like counseling, it's not. I will not be using any of the therapy models or any of the um, modalities that are used in normal counseling because this is not a counseling service. It's personal consulting and personal coaching. So I went ahead and updated my website so that you can see what kind of services I'll be offering or what kind of topics I'll be covering. So I'll just go ahead and read through them. Any family issues, parenting will not be covered because I am not a parent and I do not like to specialize or provide any services for something that I have no experience in my direct life. So I'm not a parent and I will not be providing any coaching or consulting for parenting issues. Now, I have worked with a lot of parents in my career, but again, and I do have some knowledge of parenting, but I will not talk specifically with anyone about parenting issues because I think that you should be a parent in order to give that kind of coaching. So, next would be relationship issues. Marital issues will not be covered because I'm not married and I have never been married. But I have been in relationships long term, and I do have a lot of experience with good relationships as well as not so good relationships, narcissistic abuse and that kind of thing, domestic violence, all of that. I haven't had any domestic violence bestowed upon me, but I've worked for years with families and individuals who do have or have had domestic violence issues in their lives. And I am a child who came from, or an adult child now, who came from a home where there was domestic violence present. And so the family issues is something that I've been working on for a long time with clients as well as relationship issues. And the next topic will be adults coping with domestic violence and or sexual assault. Again, all of these are topics that I have lots of experience with. Um, I have been practicing social work as a licensed professional since 2015, but unlicensed since 2009. So here we are 10 years in. I do have a lot of experience. I'll also put a link down to my LinkedIn page if you want to see the kind of work that I've done. There's a small write up on the Day to Day Social Work website also about some of my experience, or you can just contact me directly and we can talk about it. Another topic will be adult children of childhood trauma because I've been through it and I've worked with people who have gone through it and I know resources. And I know that the people that watch this channel are from all over the nation, and I don't mind connecting you with resources that are in your state because that's what social workers do. We are brokers for services, or resources rather. So, I can help with that. Um, Narcissistic abuse recovery is something that I'm really taking a likening to because of my own experience with it. And so this can be intimate partner and parental. So if you aren't really sure what narcissistic abuse is, we can have a chat about that, or you can do your own research on it. And then if you feel like you need someone to help coach you through a relationship or a former relationship and you're trying to recover from that, as well as parenting. So, my father, I do believe, had some traits and has some traits of narcissistic personality disorder. And so I have a lot of experience with that I'm still working through. And so that'll be a topic covered. Then I'll also be offering the topic or covering the topic of mentoring for at risk youth. So, what exactly is an at risk youth? Normally, an at risk youth is someone who lives in a disadvantaged area, whether it's because of socioeconomic reasons, um, and they kind of have the odds stacked against them. And so you want someone to kind of step in and show them things, teach them things, and help them learn things about what's outside of their immediate environment. So I will be providing mentoring for that topic as well, and then just any other advocacy. So, again, this is not therapy, but it is personal consulting. It's almost like life coaching, but I don't even like to call it life coaching because we all have a lot more to learn about life. So I think it's just best that it's called personal consulting and personal coaching. So those are the topics that I'll be covering in with this service. I do want you to be prepared to be very transparent about anything that you come to me about, because I think that's the best way to not attack our issues, but to delve into the problems that we have and the issues that we have, is to be very transparent about what's going on. And I know that takes time and you have to build a rapport and that kind of thing. But transparency is the best. And let's see, of course, your session will be confidential. I am a licensed social worker and I do definitely adhere to the code of ethics. So anything we talk about will be confidential. These sessions are going to be either online or by telephone, preferably online, so that we can at least see each other, because I know that a lot of people are in different states. The service is also extended to teenagers, of course, because of the at risk youth component, but 13 and up is the target range for this service. So there is a very minimal fee for a session, and that's because it's not counseling, it's just personal consulting, personal coaching. So it's not therapy, and the prices and rates will not reflect therapy. It's going to be a very, very low rate of $25 per session. No insurance and all that kind of stuff. It's just strictly discussing what challenges you have in your life currently and trying to overcome those. Now, I am familiar with therapy models and that kind of thing, but again, because I don't feel like I'm properly licensed to provide therapy, I will not be providing therapy. It'll just be consulting and coaching. And I'm saying that over and over again because I really want to make that clear. At some point, hopefully by the end of next year, which is 2020, I'll be able to offer private practice. But that's not something that I'm looking forward to. And just for those who aren't familiar with me, let me just give you a little background about my experience in social work. So I started my career out working with at-risk youth in a summer program. Actually, it's a year-round program, but most of the interactions were within a 2-week summer camp with children who were at risk. And I actually was in that program when I was a youth, and so I went back to be a mentor, and I eventually became the assistant director of that program. And so it was just amazing to see how a lot of the children at that time when I was assistant director, had a lot of issues socially, that we didn't have as children, even like 10 years before that. A lot of issues in the home, from domestic violence and sexual abuse and molestation. A lot of the children had issues with their parents. Some were suicidal, some were cutters, and that's when I first learned about what cutters were, and the kind of reasons why they cut and that kind of thing. Um, so I learned a whole lot about the children that kind of reminded me of some of the people I grew up with, and even of myself. So that'll be a service, a topic covered in the personal consulting, personal coaching, because of my experience. And I did that for about 4 years. I learned how to build a rapport with kids, and it really sparked my interest in working with adolescents, which is why I so much enjoy my job now as an ambulatory care manager, social worker for pediatric endocrinology at a hospital system. So a lot of my patients are teenagers who have type 1 diabetes or developmental and cognitive delays and that kind of thing. So it really sparked my interest in that. Um, After that, I worked at a domestic violence shelter for only 6 months. I worked doing the HPRP grant, which was the housing. It was a housing grant at that time, and that was in 2011. So I worked with survivors of domestic violence at a shelter, and I helped them obtain housing. And I did a lot of home inspections and case management and crisis intervention, and I worked with a lot of kids at that time too. So I really got my start into social work, working there with the survivors of domestic violence, um, and just learning more about domestic violence. And actually, as a kid, I stayed at that exact shelter with my mom and my siblings. Like I said, I come from a home where domestic violence was present, and came full circle to go back to that actual shelter where we stayed for a short time. And so that was very special to me. So I learned a lot there. And then I went on to work for transitional housing facility for 4 years. And that's where I did my time, as we call it, and worked with hundreds of people doing assessments, um, 3 hour long assessments. Like there were sometimes people were telling their stories for the first time to me. And I always appreciated that, because everybody doesn't open up to everybody. And so I would sit for hours and do biopsychosocial assessments with people to determine their eligibility for the program. And I mean, this is when I learned so much about domestic violence, mental illness, substance abuse, sexual abuse, just any of the areas that we practice in the field of social work. This is where I learned the most. And I always say that when I worked at this place, they kind of reintroduced me to myself and to my life and what I had gone through. And I also work with kids there. Sometimes I was not a teenager case manager, but the kids were there. The whole family was there. So I learned a lot about children that were homeless, a lot of the services that were available for families and children that were homeless. I also did case management with adults, as well as life skills with adults, as well as family literacy nights with adults, as well as a lot of planning for families. So I did a whole lot there. And I was in grad school while I worked there. So I was in grad school part time at the University of South Carolina, and I was working full time. Um, I also did a couple internships at that time. I did my first internship with a child advocacy center, where I learned how to do forensic evaluations for children who had been sexually assaulted and sometimes physically abused. And so I learned a lot about using the RATAC procedure to get children to disclose to you sexual abuse and that kind of thing. Um, they wanted me to do counseling there, but I certainly wasn't qualified, and I did not do therapy at all there. I was in grad school, didn't have a master's at the time, but I was working on it, and I never want to practice anything that I'm not competent at. So I refused to do counseling there. I left there and I did another internship for the Department of Mental Health at a day center for people with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and depression. So I learned a whole lot there about those mental illnesses. And I didn't know a lot about either of them. And I was glad that I didn't really have any preconceived notions about them. And so I was able to learn, and see and experience people who had those mental illnesses who were still able to function in the community, but some of them had a higher level of intensity in their diagnosis, and so it was hard for them to conceptualize some of the things we would teach them. It was a facility that did day groups and ADLs and IDLs and that kind of thing. So I learned a lot there. I also learned how to be very polished with my notes there. And then my final internship was with a branch of the Urban League in the city where I went to grad school. Did a lot of youth programming there, and youth services. And it was a more macro level internship where I practiced community events and community development, that kind of thing. So I worked a lot with elderly as well as children and teenagers. And then I graduated grad school and I went and became a victim advocate at a police department. And I did that for 2 years. And I worked with victims of crime, mostly domestic violence and sexual assault. Um, Providing resources, going to court with them, being on call in case someone happened to be assaulted in the middle of the night and needed accompaniment to the hospital. Um, what else did we do there? I went to court a lot with survivors of domestic violence and helped advocate for them. Um, just meeting up with people in parking lots and coming up with exit plans and that kind of thing. Again, hearing people's stories um, for the first time that they were sharing it with someone. So, the police department was a great job. I didn't really want to leave there, but there was no room for advancement. And so I moved on to the hospital system where I work now. And I've been here for almost 3 years. Love my current position. Again, as an ambulatory care manager, I do a lot of work telephonically, case management. I have a load of about 50 people. 50 is probably the most that I've had so far. But most of my patients are pediatric patients, and I love it. I go into the schools, I meet with guidance counselors, principals, administration. Um, I help with referrals to counseling, do a lot of crisis intervention, and I kind of do family counseling. This week, especially, has been a very interesting week. But I do a lot of micro counseling, we'll call it, in office counseling, but definitely not therapy, and refer them out to actual therapy locations. So, that's what I've done so far. I am, again, working on getting my independent license on a clinical level, and then I will probably move on to military social work and private practice. So I'm continuing to grow as a professional. If you've subscribed to the channel, then you know that I also provide tutoring for the license exam, master's and bachelor's level. And I do my Sunday socials every Sunday and talk about all things social work. And so I really wanted to just extend my knowledge and my gift and be able to help people who may not be able to afford regular therapy, because again, this isn't therapy, it's coaching and consulting. So if you are interested, I will leave my email below, as well as the link to the website, um, where you can find more information, and the link to my license where you can verify that I am licensed in the state of South Carolina on the master's level. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. Again, 13 and older. And I look forward to working with you and helping you become the best you that you can be. Talk to you soon.